Congratulations, you did it. You landed your first NP job interview, and honestly, it's exciting, but at the same time, now you're starting to get nervous because you want to be able to prepare for the interview. Well, you're in luck. In this video, I'm going to be going over 5 of the top questions they ask during NP interviews and how to answer them. And if you stay until the very end, I'm going to go over a bonus, so stay tuned. Welcome back to the channel, LifeofaPsychNP. If you are new to this channel, let me formally introduce myself. I'm Darty. I'm a board-certified psychiatric nurse practitioner, and in this channel, I go over several different subjects to educate the public about mental health, ways to improve your lifestyle, topics related to nursing, nurse practitioners, and how to start and grow your own private practice. So if you are interested in any of these topics, feel free to subscribe. Make sure you like this video because it helps me out so much with the YouTube algorithm, and it keeps me motivated and making more videos for you guys. So if you haven't followed me already on Instagram, follow me on Instagram at LifeofaPsychNP. So you probably clicked this video because you're trying to prepare for job interviews. It's either you landed one or you're in the process of applying for jobs and wanting to prepare in case they give you the call the very next day. And it's totally understandable, but now it's time for you to buckle down and see what you need to do in order for you to prepare for this job interview. And obviously the biggest thing is preparation, because at the end of the day, regardless of how good your resume is, if you're not able to prepare for this interview, then more than likely you're not going to get the job, because they want to see that you're prepared, especially when it comes to just talking about yourself, when it comes to just answering appropriate questions, because as a nurse practitioner, you're going to be doing a lot of educating, communication skills, and they want to be able to see that, because if you're just going to be fumbling around with your words throughout this whole entire interview, more than likely they're not going to hire you, because they want to see someone that's 1, prepared, and 2, that's confident enough to be able to give discreet directions to patients and making sure that they know exactly what's coming out of their whole situation and what they're being treated for. So without further ado, let's go over the top 5 questions that they ask you during NP interviews, and make sure you stay until the very end, because I'm going to be going over specific questions that you should ask for you to realize if that job is appropriate for you. And it's going to help you out, because once you ask them questions, they're going to understand that you're serious about this job. So you make sure you stay until the very end of this video so you can get these tips. Alrighty guys, let's get started. So the very first common question that they're most likely going to ask you during an NP interview is, tell me about yourself. As cliche as it sounds, it's one of those questions that they're going to ask you no matter what. The reason being is because all they can see on your resume is kind of your experience, where you went to school, what your accomplishments are, but they don't necessarily go beyond that. And a lot of the times, especially when hiring for a position, they want to see someone that they can work with, and they want to be able to ask you and see who you are beyond this piece of paper, because they want to make sure you're a quality fit for 1, their patients, and 2, the staff already. So you want to be able to come up with a spiel, that kind of a 1-minute story or answer that you can actually go over. So you always want to make sure you go over your experience. Obviously, you want to go over where you went to school, and then you also want to go over your passions and what you want to do in the future. The reason why I say this is because they want to see who you are beyond this piece of paper, because all the things I mentioned are on the paper, but if you're talking about your passion, if you want to talk about what you want to do in the future and how you want to go about it, and how this company may align to where you want to go to, you always want to be able to do this. I would recommend rehearsing this. Write it down, all the things that you want to do and all the things that you want to say about yourself, and then write it down and then rehearse it over and over again. I would recommend doing it in front of family members, maybe your spouse, girlfriend, boyfriend, partner, whoever. Just rehearse answering this question, because at the end of the day, the more natural it sounds, instead of super regimented, they're going to start to believe you. And if you're not going to be fumbling all over the place just trying to explain yourself, it's already going to look pretty bad from the very get-go, and you want to make a great impression from the very beginning. So the second common question asked during NP interviews is, why did you become a nurse practitioner? And this is important that you add this to the list of questions that you're going to rehearse with your partner or whoever you're going to practice with, because this comes up a lot. And I love going to interviews, and I'm not going to lie, even if I'm not looking for a job, I'll still go to interviews just to test out the water and kind of keep my skills sharp. And this is a common question asked because they want to see why you became a nurse practitioner, because more and more a lot of the newer nurses are actually just doing and becoming a nurse practitioner because they just want to become a nurse practitioner. They didn't want to go be a bedside nurse and they automatically switched because they hated bedside. Obviously, you want to be honest as much as possible during this answer, but at the same time, if it's primarily just because you're tired of bedside, you want more money, or you hated taking care of patients, then obviously you don't want to say that. But you always want to include your philosophy of care. You want to include your actual personal values and incorporating those things into your answer. And you want to be able to talk about what made you make that decision to become a nurse practitioner, whether it's the way you saw other nurse practitioners in your practice take care of their patients, or how you're able to integrate nursing care and then nursing practice into medical practice, or just the way they make those decisions in rounding out the care because they love doing both preventative and treating the problem at hand. Maybe it's just because you want more autonomy in the type of care you provide and be able to make the decision. You always want to be able to portray this to the person, because at the end of the day, they want to see why you became a nurse practitioner. They don't want to see like just privileged person just becoming a nurse practitioner because they hated working bedside. You don't want to portray that at all. So I'd highly recommend including terms such as like patient-centered care, compliance, maybe compassion, maybe integrity, things like that. Because if you include these buzzwords into your answer, then more than likely they're going to understand what's the true meaning of why you became it and how you were able to incorporate these terms into your role as a nurse practitioner. So you always want to rehearse this one, because at the end of the day, they're most likely going to ask you this, and you don't want to be fumbling with these words and not necessarily knowing how to answer this, because realistically speaking, you might have just went into it because you hated bedside. So you always want to be prepared for this question. So the third common question asked during NP interviews is, why do you want this job? So this is extremely important to add to the list of questions that you're going to answer when practicing. The reason being is because more than likely they're going to ask you this, because with so many candidates and so many jobs out there, they're going to want to know why you chose this job specifically. So my tip here is to look up their mission and vision, and you want to look up their website and just seeing what they're about and what they love to incorporate. And then you want to be able to incorporate it into why you want this job, and not just because, oh, I love the pay. You don't want to say that. You want to be able to maybe go over the benefits. Maybe you want to go over what you believe in, what they stand for. Maybe you want to go over that you love how you're able to provide preceptorship, mentorship, or you love just the fact that you're able to provide care for a certain population, or you've always wanted to work with this type of population or this type of setting. So you always want to incorporate all of these things, but also incorporate their mission and vision, what they believe in, because it'll just make it sound a lot more smoother and more familiar to them, especially when you're using their verbiage. Because at the end of the day, the more familiar with what you're saying and the more you can relate to the person interviewing, then a lot of the times it's going to be easier for them to remember you, so for you to stick out further compared to all the other candidates, because you did further research on what this company believed in and incorporated it into their answers. So it's important that you do some research prior to actually going into the interview, just so you could have some talking points, especially when it comes to answering why do you want this specific job. So the fourth common question asked during NP interview is, where do you see yourself in 5 years? So this is a very common question asked during interviews, because organizations want to see where you see yourself in 5 years. And if you don't necessarily have a plan, a lot of times they're just going to be like, oh, okay, maybe this person doesn't necessarily know. Or if the plans are too big, maybe they're going to be like, okay, this person seems like they're going to leave in a year because they want to pursue whatever their plans are. So you always want to make sure you incorporate a plan that's going to be appropriate for your organization. And you want to be able to rehearse this question because it comes up a lot. And like I mentioned, I go to a lot of interviews and they ask this question a lot. So I definitely have my own way of structuring. So I say my tips is always in the very beginning, especially as a new grad or if you're a newer nurse practitioner, I would always highly recommend using the first couple of years. I would always say the first 2 years, first 2 to 3 years is where I want to be able to gain as much experience as possible. I want to be able to learn from other providers. I want to be able to gain my sense of style in being able to provide the highest quality of care possible. And then I would go into the 4th and 5th year is I want to, in the 4th and 5th year is I want to be in some type of leadership role. Maybe not necessarily an official leadership role, but I want to be able to learn under the medical director in order to provide some leadership or provide some guidance for other people in order for them to develop. And I always use that as an example because this is important, because at the end of the day, by you saying that you want to learn as much as possible to be able to provide the highest quality of care, and then the 4th and 5th years to be able to learn under a director in order to provide some leadership experience, they know that, okay, this person can still be groomed to how I want them to be. And once they start to understand that, they're going to be like, okay, it's not like it's super far-fetched where they're going to end up leaving me in a year, or it's not going to be far-fetched enough to be like, oh, okay, this person doesn't even have any goals in the future. So this is a very good way of answering it. Obviously, there's other ways, but I've had a lot of good success from being an RN, new grad RN, being experienced RN, being a new grad NP, and then now being experienced NP. It's helped me throughout this process in answering this question appropriately. So the 5th and final common question asked during NP interviews is, why should we hire you? So this is a very common question asked, especially towards the end of the interview, because they want to see why they should hire you. So this is your time to shine. So I'd always highly recommend talking about your accomplishments, talking about your education, and talking about your experience during clinicals that led you up to this very moment, and how you want to be able to provide the highest quality of care, and you want to be able to incorporate certain terms that makes you suitable for this specific job. And when I talked about the mission and vision earlier when doing some research on this specific company, I would definitely highly recommend including some of the main terms that they utilize and some of the main things that they stand for into your answer. And the reason being is because, like I said, the more familiar with the terms that they have in your answer, the more familiar that they're going to be and recognize you as a candidate that's going to be able to stick out further compared to everyone else. And the higher the chances of them remembering you, the higher chances of them being able to hire you. So you want to be able to incorporate these things. And you also want to be able to incorporate some of your personality. And you always want to be, fun, you want to be energetic, you want to be enthusiastic, not too enthusiastic to a point, but you want to be able to incorporate these things in the answer, because at the end of the day, this is going to round out the whole interview. This is going to be able to show them who exactly you are, and you want to be able to show them that you are someone that can fit in well and fit in seamlessly in this team-oriented atmosphere when it comes to providing the highest quality of care. And at the end of the day, that's someone who they want, and you want to be able to portray that. So if you made it this far, then you know that I'm going to be providing you with something definitely helpful when it comes to interviews. And not necessarily only helpful during the specific interview, but also helpful for you to understand if that actual organization is right for you. Because at the end of the day, even if they give you the job, are you going to really like it there? And you want to be able to see and gauge if the person that's working there or interviewing there actually likes it themselves. So these are key questions that you want to ask in order for you to, 1, let them remember you by, and then 2, for you to see if the organization is good for you. So the common questions that I like to ask, especially when they ask me, do I have any questions about the position? I wrote out on a list, so I wanted to make sure I go over all of them. So the first one is is there an orientation period? So I think this is extremely important, because if they give you a longer orientation period, then you know they believe in the process of ramping you up. But if they say, oh, you're only going to have 1 or 2 days of orientation and you're going to start seeing patients at a full load of patients, then as a new grad, I'd be like, screw that. But as an experienced, maybe you'd be like, okay, let me see if this is even appropriate for me. The second question I'd like to ask, especially when you're in a state that's restricted or not full practice, is who would be my direct supervisor and when can I meet him or her? So this is important to ask, because you want to make sure you have accessibility to your supervisor, because if you're a new grad and you don't even have any sort of access, or you don't even know who the person is, then when you have a tougher case, who are you going to be able to talk to? You want to be able to talk to someone. So that's something important to ask. And then I would say, like, how would you describe the work-life balance here? So this is important, because at the end of the day, you want to have an appropriate work-life balance. And this kind of incorporates how they're going to talk about PTO, how they're going to talk about paid time off in regards to holidays, things like holiday pay and time off, maybe mental health day. And if a lot of times they're like, oh, I can't even answer that question, then you're going to be like, pretty hesitant to get the job. But if they are able to incorporate all of these things, then you're going to be like, okay, now I know I could enjoy this job, because people here can actually describe an appropriate work-life balance. And then my final question that I love to ask is, what are certain things in this job or in this organization do you like, and why do you like working here? And this kind of like puts them in a situation where, like, whoa, like, why are they even asking me this? The reason why I like to ask this is because if you can truly tell if someone likes their job based off of their answer, and if they're able to pull out so many different things about why they love this job, it's going to be like, okay, this is a job that I'm going to like. But if it's only going to be like generic things like, oh, I like the paid time off, I like the cafeteria, then is it really somewhere you want to work, especially if this is going to be the main thing that you're going to be doing for the rest of your life? So you always want to think about that. I love asking that question, especially if it's a panel, because they get to bring in certain things. And if they're kind of all just saying the same thing, many times, more times than not, that there are not that many things that they like about this job. But if they're able to talk about so much and actually have some enthusiasm about that answer, then more than likely they love the job. So definitely that's something you always want to consider. Well guys, I know this video is extremely long, but I wanted to put this out there because more and more of you guys are starting to interview, and I like to be able to help, especially during this interview process, and kind of giving you these common questions asked, and then common questions that you can ask, especially when it comes to interviews. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. As always, have a wonderful day. Until next time, bye!